Most headcount reports just show you one number. How many people work here right now? And that's fine until you're in a board meeting and somebody asks you how that number's changed over the last 2 years. The issue is not that your BI team doesn't know how to build a report that shows that. It's that when those reports are being designed, most organizations don't know what to ask for. So they end up with static charts or relying on manual Excel work to get the answers that they actually need. So today, I'm going to walk you through what decision-ready reporting looks like for headcount. Not down in the weeds of Power BI and what to click, but the real headcount views that are going to show you the answers to the questions that you really get. Let's start with where most organizations are, a card with a single total headcount figure. How many active employees are there right now? The problem is that that just answers one question. So you've got no context and no way to know what's actually changing. The fix is obvious, right? Just swap the card for a line chart and put time along the x-axis. However, what happens is most reports lock you into just one view, yearly, quarterly, or monthly. And then the moment somebody asks you a different question, you're rebuilding that report or exporting out to Excel. So the first thing a decision-ready headcount report needs is a time axis that flexes. One visual, but the user can toggle between year, quarter, or month, depending on what conversations that they're having. So we use something called a field parameter in Power BI that lets the user change the axis themselves without anyone needing to go in and rebuild that report. Also, I add in a relative date slicer because that really lets you customize the view. So now that you can see the trend, here's what most reports then miss. They show the total, but they hide the movement. Your headcount might look stable, but what if you hired 32 people and 35 left? That's a completely different story than if you hired 5 and you lost 3. And a flat line can hide massive churn. We're talking like 50 to 200% of a role salary could be being paid out in replacement costs. So you're bleeding budget, but the report is going to make that look invisible. And everyone's just going to assume everything is fine, so the problem doesn't get flagged until there's an absolute crisis. That's why you need to surface the movement. I use a combo chart. I have hires as positive columns and terminations as negative, and then the total headcount line. So the board can now see stability and turnover at the same time. I usually make the columns semi-transparent so that that total line still really stays a focus, but you're given the movement as context. Movement tells you about stability, but it doesn't tell you where your workforce is actually concentrated. That's composition. Composition is how our headcount is distributed across, in our case, division, location, and age brackets. And it sounds pretty simple until you try and show it. What most people do is they just jump into building 3 separate stacked column charts, one for each category. The problem is, as you can see, it looks really cluttered. But it's actually an easy one to consolidate. One stacked column chart and then give viewers the option to toggle between division, location, and age. I've used exactly the same field parameter approach that we use for the data access. So now I've just got one chart with different breakdowns. One small design note I want to point out is I've moved the legend down to beside where the toggle buttons are. Grouping related controls together really can improve the comprehension for the report viewer. They're not left hunting around trying to understand what they're looking for. So now we can see how headcount is broken down, but there's still a question around absolute numbers because they can obscure if something's growing or just keeping pace. The way we display data absolutely changes how people see it. For example, if we switch to a 100% stacked percentage view, you can see now that operations is actually becoming a larger share of the overall workforce. This is the difference between knowing how big something is and knowing how significant it might be. This is why for decision-ready reporting, I like to give options. So, for example, the ability to switch between chart types. So you can toggle between seeing absolute numbers or percentages. But even in the percentages view, there is a limitation. Let's say you want to compare how different age brackets are trending year over year, and you want to be able to see that really clearly. Well, you can end up trying to trace different colours across the bars, and you know there's insight in there, but you're just not really sure where. This is where something called small multiples can be really handy. Instead of one big stacked chart, you can create a series of smaller bar charts, one for each age bracket, for example. Now you can compare each category trend year over year at an easy glance. In this example, I've also used conditional formatting to highlight the highest values. Conditional formatting is an amazing tool for storytelling. So when you're designing your reports, also think about what's the most important piece. How can we use formatting to highlight that so that your board can spot shifts without follow-up questions and is easy to find the insights. And that's what it really comes down to. Most headcount reports just answer one question: how many people work here? But that's just a snapshot. It's not meaningful reporting. The questions that your board is actually asking: how has this changed? Where's the churn? What's shifting structurally? Those need time, movement, context built in. If your report can't answer those questions, you're missing the opportunity to tell a story in the data. And you're likely missing important insights. However, there is still one weak point. Most teams break all of this the moment they take a screenshot and just paste it into PowerPoint. Watch this next video where I'm going to show you how to embed your Power BI reports directly into PowerPoint so that your headcount story stays interactive and always up to date.